Okay, today we will be learning about the benign conditions of the ovary. So when we talk about benign conditions of the ovary, it is not just tumors. We are not just talking about benign tumors, like what you've learned in about benign tumors and malignant tumors. We are also talking about some other benign conditions which are not neoplastic in origin as well. Okay, so how do you classify ovarian cysts? As such, you have functional cysts. Okay, then you have benign ovarian tumors, borderline tumors, and malignant ovarian tumors. So we'll be talking about the functional cysts and the benign ovarian tumors in this class. Functional cysts are physiologic, okay, and they form from normal ovarian function. That's why they are called functional cysts. They are physiologic in origin. There's no neoplasm involved in that. These can be follicular cysts, corpus luteal cysts, and theca lutein cysts, and generally can reach up to even 10 centimeters. But they are expected to spontaneously resolve because they are physiologic. Now, follicular cysts, how does that originate? From the mature antral follicle which does not ovulate. What happens if the ovulation does not occur from the mature antral follicle? The ovum will degenerate inside. But since it did not rupture, the follicle as such will remain cystic. Only if it ruptures, it releases the contents, right? The ovum and the rest of the contents, and then it undergoes changes into corpus luteum. So in this case, which is a mature antral follicle which did not ovulate, the ovum will degenerate and the follicle will remain cystic there. And the granulosa and theca lutein cells undergo epithelialization around it. So that is what it forms how it forms a cyst around. It's a follicular cyst, generally due to excessive gonadotropin stimulation. Corpus luteum cyst occurs when the ovulation has already occurred. Generally, it will be more than 3 cm in size. To differentiate from a normal corpus luteum, to call it a corpus luteum cyst as such. Okay, it can be corpus hemorrhagica. There is a hemorrhage into the corpus luteum cyst. And corpus luteum of pregnancy is another entity where you have estrogen and progesterone production. And it is generally mistaken for ectopic pregnancy because it is a corpus luteum of pregnancy. If somebody has got a pain and that will be one-sided, right? It's in the ovary, so it will be an adnexal site, and there will be pain to one side. Somebody is UPT positive pregnant. So there are two differential diagnoses that you have. Either it is an ectopic pregnancy or it is a corpus luteum of the pregnancy. So it's very important to differentiate between the two, right? If it's an ectopic pregnancy, you will have to do something about it. If it's a corpus luteum of pregnancy, probably you can wait upon it. So you need to differentiate between the two. Then there is this entity called luteoma of pregnancy where there is multiple foci of luteal tissue in the ovary. It is generally seen like during cesarean section. Sometimes you can see both the ovaries will be like bulky and large, about 8 to 20 centimeter size. Generally can even become 20 centimeter. Generally what we see is about 6 to 8 centimeter size. It will be orange yellow or grayish yellow. Okay, so it can mimic a tumor. It can look quite grossly. It can look like a tumor also, but it is a condition that is seen in pregnancy. Now, theca lutein cysts. Okay, theca lutein cysts are generally bilateral and multicystic. They are larger. That is basically the ovary has undergone excessive luteinization. The causes are high level of gonadotropins, like where do you find high level of gonadotropins in molar pregnancy, right? HCG is increased in molar pregnancy, choriocarcinoma, multiple pregnancy, then clomiphene citary stimulation. So these conditions wherever HCG level can be increased is where you find bilateral multicystic theca lutein cysts. And also you can get theca lutein cysts in case of chronic hyperemia, which causes congestion and many follicles will grow, and that can form this theca lutein cysts also. Like in PID they say sometimes chronic hyperemia but it's just a very rare cause for it. Generally when you say theca lutein cysts, first thing you're thinking about is molar pregnancy or multiple pregnancy. Now, what are the symptoms of functional cysts? So we said these are functional, these are physiologic, we expect them to go away, but generally the patient will come to you with some kind of symptoms, right? So the symptoms are mainly what? These are functional. So the ovarian function is involved in this. So you can, as expected, it will be related to the ovulation of the ovary, ovulation from the ovary, as well as the menstrual function, right? So the ovulation will decide on how the menstrual function occurs. So they can present with menstrual complaints like polymenorrhea, polymenorrhagia, or amenorrhea, oligomenorrhea, or even infertility due to suppression of ovulation. So those are due to the ovulation problems, you can have menstrual problems and infertility. Now, in case sometimes they will present you with pain. Actually, they will come to you with pain, which is due to an enlarged cyst or a hemorrhage into the cyst, or due to torsion occurring in the cyst. So this is generally you will see these girls coming, maybe like 16, 17-year-olds, or maybe 20, 24-year-old, all in the reproductive age group. Then with non-neoplastic condition. They might have some ovulatory problems which they may not come to you for. They might actually come to you with pain, and that pain might be due to any of these things: corpus luteal cyst or follicular cyst which has undergone torsion, or hemorrhage, or it has become enlarged, and simply because the enlargement it is painful for the patient. So treatment, if it is asymptomatic, just leave it alone, and if it is symptomatic, surgery or conservative management. Asymptomatic, we would leave alone for 3 months, 3 to 4 months. In that period, we expect the ovarian function to come back to normal and all these functional cysts generally disappear. That is why we say leave alone. Now we come to other cysts. There are the other cysts also mentioned, like atretic cyst, which can be corpus luteum, corpus albicans, corpus fibrosus. Any of them forming a cyst can be due to the atresia of the corpus luteum. Then there are germinal inclusion cysts, which have altered inclusion seen microscopically, maybe the precursors of for epithelial ovarian cancer, coelomic in origin. Okay, these are very rarely described. Don't really need to look into it too much. Now we come to the ovarian neoplasms. As it's like I said, we will be speaking about the benign ovarian neoplasms in this class. So ovarian neoplasms generally they originate from what all types of cells? From the epithelial cells, from the stroma which contains the granulosa and theca cells, and also from the germ cells. So this is a picture showing the origin of the histological origin of the ovarian neoplasms. Like as you can see, surface epithelium has this, from the surface epithelium you get the serous tumors, mucinous tumors, endometrioid tumors, clear cell tumors and transition cell tumors. From the sex cord stroma area, this area you can get the granulosa cell tumors, thecoma, fibroma, Sertoli cell and the Sertoli Leydig cell tumors. And this is from the germ cells, right? The germ cells inside you can find the dysgerminomas. These will give rise to dysgerminomas, yolk sac tumors, embryonal carcinoma, choriocarcinoma and teratoma. This is neoplasms in general I am talking about, not just ovarian neoplasms. This is just talking about the origin, the histology of the ovarian neoplasms in total, not just the benign. Okay, benign and malignant. So now we come to the what percentage of ovarian neoplasms are benign? About 80% is benign. So every woman who comes to the OPD is worried, right? She would have had how do you think they come to you? Generally, how do patients present to you with an ovarian neoplasm? It is usually when they have undergone ultrasound for some other complaint maybe, or maybe some menstrual function they have undergone, or maybe for those abdominal pain or something they might have, or abdominal distension they might have asked for an ultrasound and they would have found it. Okay, so 80% of ovarian neoplasms are benign. So when the patient comes to itself, you are hoping that it's a benign, because everybody is worried, right? Even the PCOD term, PCOD has got cyst in it, so immediately the patient will be worried. Ovarian cyst, oh, I've got a cyst in the ovary, is it a cancer? Okay, because always anything in the ovary is related to cancer for the general public. Now, benign ovarian neoplasms can be solid or cystic also. Generally, we'll say cystic, right? Everything that is cystic and thin-walled with uniloculated, everything that will be considered cystic. But even sometimes there are solid tumors which are benign ovarian neoplasms. Now, in the postmenopausal age group, 25%, slightly higher percentages malignant tumors only. And about 10% ovarian tumors in the premenopausal women are malignant. Now we come to the benign tumors. So the benign tumors, most common benign tumors that you find is epithelial ovarian tumors. Okay, so you have, like I said, all those cell lines you can have benign tumors and malignant tumors. The benign tumors that originate from the epithelial site is serous, mucinous or endometrioid tumors, which are not malignant. They are only benign tumors. And germ cells, you have mature cystic teratoma or the dermoid cyst, which you would have learned in detail in your pathology days. Just remember that. Okay. And then the stromal tumors, of which the benign tumors are thecoma and fibroma. So these are the benign tumors, benign ovarian tumors. Now, like I said, the big chunk is from the epithelium. Okay, epithelial ovarian tumors are the most common ovarian tumors. So that is mucinous and serous cyst adenomas. Then you have Brenner tumors, sex cord stromal cell tumors, then dermoid cyst 2025. So mostly by and large, whenever somebody comes to you with an ovarian tumor, and if it turns out to be benign, it will be mucinous and serous cyst adenoma or a dermoid cyst most commonly. Okay, the other two varieties you will be finding it very rarely. Now, serous cyst adenomas usually do not reach very large size. That is, very large sizes when you're talking about in relation to the mucinous cyst adenomas. Okay, they can be unilocular or multilocular, smooth surface and fluid filled. So these are the general characteristics of benign tumors, right? When you talk about benign tumors as such. Mucinous cyst adenomas can reach very large size and they are filled with thick mucinous material. So you can get that thick material will be there in the mucinous cyst adenoma. And if it undergoes perforation or rupture, it will lead to pseudomyxoma peritonei. which is a troublesome condition, you know, right? It will keep coming back, this pseudomyxoma peritonei. Okay, so what they do is what we do to prevent it is when we do a surgery, we have to take it out without rupturing the mucinous cystoderma. We have to take it out without rupturing the contents to the peritoneal cavity. If at all that happens, then we give a 5% dextrose wash to dissolve the mucinous content and give a nice peritoneal wash, hoping that will help. Okay, because if the perforation occurs, there is a chance that it can lead on to pseudomyxoma peritonei, which is a recurrent condition for the patient. Now the third thing is endometrioma, which is chocolate cyst associated with endometriosis. I think you had a class on endometriosis. So anyway, it is just considered as a benign tumor. You can, I mean, nobody even considers it a benign tumor. It is, endometriosis is a different entity altogether. But endometriomas, chocolate cysts, they can present to you as adnexal cyst. Okay, which is not functional, which is a benign ovarian cyst only. Now comes to dermoid cysts. So dermoid cysts are usually small, maybe bilateral. Dermoid cysts, again, they are they are found if you do an ultrasound for some other condition, they might come to you with a dermoid cyst, and because it is not a cystic structure as such, because it contains elements from the 3 cell lines. It is a cyst generally, but it contains elements. It's not going to be a simple cyst. It's not going to be like one simple cyst with a fluid contained cavity. It has elements from the 3 cell lines: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So it contains usually hair, sebum, and teeth. It can change into malignant teratoma very rarely. These the components, any of these components can turn into malignancy also. But generally, by and large, dermoid cysts are benign only. They have not undergone malignant change. If they undergo malignant change, it's called a malignant teratoma. And while doing the surgery, again, here we have to avoid spilling the contents, because the contents can cause chemical peritonitis. Okay, not pseudomyxoma peritonei, it can cause chemical peritonitis due to the contents will be left behind in the abdominal cavity. Generally sebum and all that, right? So there will be peritonitis in response to that. Now, in rare cases, mature cystic teratomas may undergo malignant transformation, and most often in the postmenopausal patients, that most commonly results in squamous cell carcinoma. Now, other malignant tumor types like carcinoid, thyroid carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, intestinal adenocarcinoma, melanoma, leiomyosarcoma, chondrosarcoma also can occur. Like I said, any of the 3 cell lines can undergo malignant transformation. Most commonly, it is a squamous cell carcinoma that occurs. So this is a picture of the dermoid cyst, which you all are familiar with from your pathology days. That's a uterus in the center, and you can see the bilateral dermoid cyst with multilocator containing some sebum, some this yellow stuff is a sebum, and some hair here probably. Okay. Now we come to fibroma. Now fibromas are firm in consistency. It is associated with Meigs syndrome. Okay, Meigs syndrome is a condition where you have a benign ovarian pathology with ascites. Generally, whenever you're seeing ascites, what are you thinking about? You're thinking that it could be a malignant, right? Ascites means usually malignant pathology, but fibroma is a condition where you can get a Meigs syndrome, where you get benign ovarian fibroma, ascites, and right-sided pleural effusion. And following the surgery or removal of fibroma, there is spontaneous resolution of the ascites and hydrothorax. So that's about fibroma. It's a benign tumor of the fibroblasts. It is grossly, it is solid white mass with firm white bands. You can see like here. Okay, and the Meigs syndrome we talked about, and there's something also called the Gorlin syndrome, which is associated with fibromas and mutational inactivation of the PTCA gene. So this is generally, this is a nevoid basal cell carcinoma, which also in Gorlin syndrome, instead of the basal cell carcinoma, you can get fibromas, or you can get other benign tumors of the jaw and things like that. Okay, fibromas can occur in the ovary or even in the heart. Small tumors can occur in Gorlin syndrome. Okay, now we come to Brenner tumor, which is a surface epithelial stromal tumor. It is generally asymptomatic, predominantly solid on imaging and pathologic examination. Association with serous and mucinous, they can occur in association with serous and mucinous cystadenomas in up to 30%. And microscopically, there is abundant dense fibrous stroma with epithelial nests of transitional cells, resembling those of the urinary. So like transitional cells of the urinary bladder, right? So they resemble the transitional cells of the urinary bladder. These are called Waltert nests. So these are all important MCQ questions or one-word questions generally. Brenner tumor, this Waltert cell nest, transitional cells. Okay. Now, how do these benign ovarian tumors present? Whenever you talk about malignant ovarian tumors, I think first thing you will talk about is you will say is loss of appetite, loss of weight. And actually, as such, loss of appetite and loss of weight comes much later, right? In stage 3 and stage 4 ovarian cancers. So early malignant tumors also of the ovary as well as these benign tumors, it might not present for a long time. They will be asymptomatic, right? Until it fills up the cavity and with the peritoneal cavity and the patient comes up with some kind of symptom. So generally it's a common mistake everybody makes when you're asked about the signs and symptoms of ovarian cancer or ovarian tumors, people directly go to the menstrual function. But ovarian tumors don't have that kind of hormonal influence on the menstruation. Okay, there's no hormonal influence on the endometrium of the uterus, which can occur with certain estrogen secreting and other hormonal secreting tumors. Yes, it can happen. But by and large, because we talked about it, right? We said it is going to be serous epithelial tumors or mucinous epithelial tumors, which are not cancers. They are not hormone generating. So they are not going to come out with many symptoms, anything much on the menstrual side. It's not going to affect the uterine endometrium. There are no hormones produced. Okay, so generally what will they present with? It is the pressure symptoms, or due to the bulk of the tumor, that is how they can present. So increasing abdominal girth or abdominal discomfort, pressure symptoms on the bowel or bladder, and occasionally, like we talked about the benign ovarian condition which are not neoplastic. Here also you can get hemorrhage into the ovarian cyst or a torsion or rupture. Generally, very commonly dermoid cysts are known to undergo torsion and come to us. Okay. So because of all this, they can present with acute abdomen, either if it's hemorrhage occurring, torsion or rupture, or sometimes even infection can occur in the ovarian cyst. Okay, and mostly, and many cases are asymptomatic and coincidentally diagnosed. Okay, they may not have any symptom at all if there is no pressure symptoms like this. Now, what are the radiologic features of benign tumors? This is the important characteristic to differentiate benign tumors from malignant tumors, right? So always you'll be asked in your exam, how will you differentiate between benign tumors and malignant ovarian tumors? Because most of the distinction is going to be radiologically. Clinically, yes, of course, clinically also the surface you can describe and other characteristics are there to differentiate between stage 4 and stage 3 ovarian cancers and the benign ovarian tumors. But ultrasound wise, how do you differentiate between benign ovarian tumors and malignant ovarian tumors? So benign tumors are generally unilocular. These are very important points. Okay, they are unilocular. They are mostly unilateral, smooth surfaced. Okay, no solid elements. These are, I think you know from your pathology, right? They're not supposed to contain any solid elements. No internal or external. This solid elements is for the benign cystic tumors. Okay, you have some benign ovarian solid tumors also, like